then let's get started. So, in 2019, a young woman by the name of Piper Johnson was about to begin her trip with her mother to the University of Colorado. So it was about to be a pretty big road trip because they were from Chicago and they were driving. At the beginning of the trip, Piper began to feel discomfort in her chest. So she thought nothing of it. She took 2 Advil and they continued on. As the trip went on, the discomfort increased. She began to experience a quick heart rate, a sense of lethargy, and also a severe fever. So after these other symptoms arose, Piper and her mother decided it was time to go to the hospital. At the hospital, she received antibiotics, steroids, as well as an x-ray. The x-ray revealed that her symptoms were most likely from a form of pneumonia, but her symptoms continued to worsen. Piper actually said that she was sobbing because it hurt so bad to breathe. After her initial treatment, Piper stayed in the hospital for another 7 days while the doctors conducted more research. And it was found that the worsening of her symptoms were most likely an effect of her recently acquired habit of vaping. After realizing what this habit was doing to her body, Piper decided that she wanted to raise awareness where institutions have failed. And by institutions, I mean institutions such as the Federal Drug and Food Administration. In 2019 alone, over 1,000 teenagers suffered from lung disease as an effect of vaping. And also, in a survey done by Monitoring the Future in 2019, there's been a 10% increase in teen vaping from 2017 to 2019. Now, while it may sound like I'm going to be talking about teen vaping today, I'm actually talking about the institutional failure which has allowed this to become such a large issue. And that institution is the Federal Drug and Food Administration. So my name is Maisie Bobkovas, and today I'm going to be talking to you about why I believe that the FDA is an inefficient agency. Now, before we get into this, I do need to set some limitations because it's a very broad topic which could go into numerous areas. So firstly, I'm not presenting a solution to the FDA's inefficiencies. That would dominate the discussion and have way too many variables. I will also not be proposing any plans of reconstruction for the FDA. And I'm also not suggesting that the FDA should be closed or replaced, as that would cause many other issues. Now, you need to know a little bit about where the FDA came from and about when it came into play. So the FDA is only about 100 years old, and up until the early 1900s, there were no enforced standards for food quality, packaging, and labeling. That inevitably led to many mishaps, such as manufacturers put extra spices in canned goods in order to hide expiration to prolong shelf life. Also, manufacturers weren't held accountable for what they were putting in their products. For instance, some manufacturers were actually putting cocaine in their healing products to make people feel better, and the consumers didn't know that. All they knew is that they were getting some sort of result. So just instances like these were a result of the lack of a standard. Now, you may wonder why the government wasn't involved at this time. Well, Congress was heavily influenced by the captains of industry at this time, and they kind of wanted to let industry do its thing and make America great, which kind of led to a hands-off approach to all these problems that were arising. Well, one man in particular led in the awareness of what was actually happening and pushing for the government to actually do something about it. This man was Upton Sinclair, and he decided to go undercover as a worker at a meat packaging plant. He decided that he would record what he saw in his journal and then hopefully get it published so that the public could see what was going on, as well as government leaders. When Teddy Roosevelt read this journal and read about the unsanitary and inhumane conditions that were happening in just one processing plant, this pushed him to actually take initiative and put together some legislation. This led to the Pure Food and Drug Act, as well as the Federal Meat Inspection Act. there were more policies put in place, such as the Federal Drug, Food, and Cosmetic Act of 1938, which I'll sort of touch on later, and many other policies which were to be enforced and governed by the Federal Food and Drug Administration. Now, the FDA grew with America as more and more families were there and more people in industries grew. They also grew as well. Presently, there's about 14,000 employees that work for the FDA, according to the Smithsonian in 2017. But despite the growth of this agency, there are still numerous issues that have been left unattended, which are affecting the public. And that's why today, in talking about the FDA's inefficiencies, I want to focus on their flawed processing system, the lack of accountability, which has resulted, as well as the negative impacts on consumers as a result of this inefficiency. All of these combine to create a very terrible situation with very dangerous circumstances for consumers. So firstly, I'd like to talk about the flawed processing system. There's many issues with this, but today I'm going to start with the conflicts of interest within the system. So in order for a product to be approved, the company who's seeking approval must put together evidence and data to present before the panel advisors. Then the panel advisors takes that information and decides whether the benefits outweigh the risk. But for the most part, the company is what is doing most of the research. Now, this gets a little interesting because the panel advisors are supposed to be impartial to the companies seeking approval, but there have been instances where post hoc earnings have been recorded. Now, the FDA has policies which try and prevent bribery before and during the approval process, but there's not much about what happens after. So, for instance, we can talk about the drug Brilinta's approval case. Before the approval actually happened, there were no conflicts of interest found, no ties to the panel advisors. But approximately a year after Brilinta's approval, it was found that this companies which supported Brilinta were sending monetary rewards to the panel advisors, meaning while they didn't get money before, they certainly were getting money after for the approval that happened. And this was all from an article in Science magazine. Another example is a cardiologist in New York, Dr. Halperin. He received over $200,000 while participating on a clinical committee for Brilinta's drug approval process. This was extra rewards that didn't necessarily need to be given. These examples show that there is a lot of biased decisions which may be occurring on this panel, which is deciding whether products are safe for consumers to buy or not. And this is honestly increasing consumer risk. And once consumers are finding out about it, it is also decreasing consumer faith in an agency which is designed or supposedly to protect them. So next, I'm going to talk about the small amount of research and data that the FDA actually has on products when they are approving them. And this lack of research has led to many retracted products over time. For instance, medical organization Sage said that ezogabine, an anticonvulsant, received expedited approval, meaning that the research was looked at and supposedly the benefits outweighed the risks. But later it was found to cause severe retinal damage as well as loss of vision. So although it was researched and approved by the FDA, it still damaged many of these people's health and their physical condition. Another example, Vioxx, an anti-inflammatory, which is comparable to naproxen. It went through the process, it was researched and considered, and it was approved. And in one of the last meetings, it was found to be causing twice as many heart issues, as well as raising the death rate by 2 times in comparison to the drug which is already approved, naproxen. It had already been approved, but it had been allowed to be exposed to all these different people. And there is a big issue with that. Now, this kind of just sheds some light on how the fast track approval process may not be the wisest choice, as it allows many dangerous drugs onto the market, as reported by NPR's reporter, Mr. Knox. Now, in defense of this, the FDA believes that their policies and practices are safe. And to defend the fast track process, they say that it's actually created for patients in critical condition. And that's not necessarily for everybody, but they need to get it released for those particular individuals. And also, the Office for Human Protections Research says that the FDA's policies prevent conflicts of interest in the beforehand process. And both of these sources together combine to basically say that the policy that is enacted right now is already enough. But as we've seen from previous examples, is it really? Editor for medical publications, Jonathan Block, said that people want sound evidence and impartiality. When their products are being reviewed, they want sound evidence either from the companies or evidence sought out by the FDA. And those advisors also need to be impartial so that the consumer safety can be ensured. Even an anonymous user on Alliance for Natural Health said that the FDA seems to be the most corrupt and untrustable organization. These conflicts of interest and the lack of research has led to greater public concern, and seemingly for good reason. Another area we need to look at is the lack of accountability that has resulted from the FDA's inefficiencies. I'd like to start by talking about additives, whether in food products or even products such as conditioner and soap. So additives are used to preserve products, color products, and even flavor, make them salty, sweet, without actually using salt and sugar. All these additives have been found to have very negative side effects. According to Ingredients Insight, the public is becoming more aware of the negative effects of these additives because of the research that is being done. For instance, phthalates. They're used in conditioners, soaps, food. They're a known endocrine disruptor, as said on Marion Breast Cancer Watch. Now, what is endocrine disruptor? It is a chemical that once it enters the body, it affects the regulation of hormones, meaning it usually increases production or decreases. Your body already has a natural flow of how hormones are produced for your body specifically. When chemicals come in, they mess up your body's balance, which can lead to lots of negative effects later on. Another additive when you talk about food coloring, in just about all food products, you see this as blue number 2 or red 40. They're used to enhance color, but according to Precision Nutrition in 2017, most of these are known carcinogens. It's not a suspicion, it's a proven fact. And on Scientific American, they often cause a lack of focus and behavioral issues, such as hyperactivity. I've actually seen this personally, as my younger brother, when he was about 6 or 7, he would experience these behavioral outbursts where he would be screaming in a rage and crying for about an hour, and after it was over, he would be very confused as to why he was as upset as he got. And later we found that red dye 40 was his trigger. When we cut that dye out of his diet, the outburst stopped, and he no longer had to deal with that. And according to the studies, he's not the only one that experiences side effects as a result. Next, I want to talk about the lack of accountability when it comes to manufacturers and their labeling processes. So, as of late, companies often deceive the FDA and hide ingredients, or in some cases, they can blatantly put the product ingredients out there with no correction from the FDA. And the amount of freedom that these manufacturers have because of the FDA has led to a lot of deceitful advertising. The FDA itself in 2013 said that although ingredients are required to be listed, fragrance can hide certain ingredients on a label. Meaning, if you buy perfume and you are looking at the ingredients and you see water and you see oil, you can also see the term fragrance. If you decide you want to contact that company just to see what is fragrance made up of, that company has the right to deny you that knowledge of what's in your product. And this is just one way that manufacturers are hiding ingredients which potentially could be harmful to you. Otherwise, why would they be hiding it? Another area is the natural and organic labeling. So in today's world, more people are becoming more supportive of natural foods and organic foods and are tending to pay the extra money to buy them. Well, the issue comes whenever you are looking at the quality of those natural and organic foods. According to the Federal Drug, Food, and Cosmetic Act of 1938, for a manufacturer to put natural and organic in a not to be true is not considered misbranding that product, meaning the FDA doesn't police natural and organic products. So there's not a for sure way to decide whether or not the products that you're paying extra for are actually natural or organic, or if they're just being treated as normal products with a different label. And that's just another example of how there's no accountability by the FDA in terms of labeling. Now, the FDA fights this by actually using the Federal Drug, Food, and Cosmetic Act of 1938 by saying that it already shields consumers from harmful ingredients. So basically saying the standard for safety is already set and that everything is all right. But in response to this, the public is becoming more concerned about this self-regulation that's happening. On greenplanet.com, many believe that companies can hide harmful ingredients because of the loopholes. And evidently, as we've seen before, there's many different instances where companies are hiding ingredients. And to what end? We don't know, because they're allowed to hide it. So the FDA is failing to keep these industries accountable for what's in our foods and what's on our labels. The last area I would like to look at today is the negative impacts that the lack of accountability and the flawed processing system is having on consumers. Firstly, when you look at the physical area, for instance, diabetes. According to Nutrition Coalition, the national rate of diabetes has increased by 28%, which has costed $327 billion in 2017 alone, meaning that this condition is not only hurting those who have it physically, but it's also draining them financially to pay for the treatment that is used to fix it. And the fact that there are ingredients in our everyday foods which are, one, worsening diabetes, and two, encouraging it, is very discouraging to hear. Dr. Hoffman from Marquette University actually said artificial sweeteners worsen diabetes and also can encourage the onset of it. So what doesn't make sense to me is that they are allowed in our foods and are approved by the FDA to be put in certain products. Another concern about the health of the United States is the obesity rate. Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development said in a study that close to 50% of the U.S. struggles with obesity. Now, many people say that obesity is a choice. You can choose to eat more, you can choose to eat less. But what many don't realize is that the quality of food that is being ingested affects that condition a lot. And whenever we're talking about saturated fats, for instance, according to Everyday Health, saturated fats are actually affecting our gut health as well as our immune health, making us more susceptible to common colds or viruses such as the coronavirus, and just along with that, so forth. So the presence of fat and sweeteners, saturated fat to be specific, is only contributing to the poor health of America. Now, although we're affected physically by what's in our foods in our everyday life, there's also a mental effect also that is occurring. So it seems the FDA has actually encouraged dangerous prescriptions over the years, and we've seen this in numerous cases. But the opioid crisis has been a very evident example of this. For instance, in the early 1900s, Purdue Pharmaceuticals produced OxyContin, which was approved by the FDA for use, and doctors were assured that it was safe to use, that it was all right. The risks did not outweigh the benefits. According to Reflections Recovery Center in 2018, in a study they did, 42,000 people died from 2000 to 2016. And in total, over all the years that the opioid crisis has been an issue, about 600 deaths have occurred from opioids such as Oxycontin. Now, while many dangerous prescriptions have been taken off after they realized the effects of them, they're still adding dangerous drugs to this list. For instance, Disruptor. It is a pain management drug, according to a Healthline article, which is 1,000 times more potent than morphine. Now, just think about this for a second. According to Addiction Center in 2019, morphine is one of the largest factors in accidental deaths. The FDA has approved the drug Disruptor, which is 1,000 times more potent than morphine. That only increases the risk of abuse and accidental deaths, being that Disruptor is so strong. So all these dangerous prescriptions which are being approved are only increasing the risk to consumers. Now, while this may seem very concerning to some, 2018, Nova Biologicals team said the FDA tests products before approval, making sure the benefits outweigh the risks. So they kind of go back to defend that the FDA has the research and the data to prove that they're okay, at least to the best of their capabilities. But in response to this, nutritionist Dr. Richards says, despite policies, the FDA has been overtaken by groups it was supposed to regulate. So whether it's pharma and the food manufacturing companies, they're being overtaken by these industries, and the effects can be seen through America's health and food quality. So just as we saw in Piper Johnson's case, where her habit was a result of the FDA allowing vapes, to be allowed, it gave her the condition that she had. It just shows that the FDA is an inefficient agency because of its flawed processing system, because of the lack of accountability among industries, and because of the negative impacts on consumers. Now, each of these provide evidence to expose the FDA's inefficiencies. And while the FDA is responsible for protecting consumers, it seems as if they are failing to fulfill their responsibility. And that is why I'd like to leave you with a quote by French philosopher Molière. Accountability is not what we do, but what we do not do for which we are accountable. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just waiting to see if you're going to breathe a sigh of relief.
I kind of did. I did a mini one.
You know, there's not a lot to say. You've pretty much covered the whole waterfront. Excellent job. These guys don't know what you ended up with. What, 7 pages of references?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought you integrated them quite well. The interesting thing I find about this particular topic, and I'm not sure I can disagree with anything you said, each one of your points of development is a separate paper in and of themselves, I think.
Yeah.
The FDA has turned into a giant runaway freight train. And so just trying to get your arms around that, for one thing, is tough. Do you see any way to get your arms around the FDA? I mean, the scope of what they've been given to do is so large and vast. I don't know if they can ever go unchecked.
I don't think so either. Just like for one instance, they're supposed to regulate big pharma, but in today's world, it's basically big pharma is regulating the FDA because their budget is 3 times the FDA's. And so honestly, that's just one of the areas that the FDA is supposed to regulate. So that's why it's really hard to determine whether there is a way for the FDA to really get control of everything that they're supposed to.
Yeah. Somebody else has.
Yes, I'm sorry. One of the things that I remember at the very beginning of your research when we went to Sam Houston State I believe that you came across an article about the young man who, I think, used Axe products, and it actually just nearly killed him because Axe would not. They felt like they narrowed it. The family narrowed it down to Axe, and if I can remember correctly, they did ask that Axe report the ingredients so that they could confirm, so that they were asking because they needed help.
Yep.
And Axe refused. And under the right, if I'm not mistaken, because they said they had the right not to post their, they had that right because they didn't want others to steal their recipe for making.
Yes.
Is that correct? I mean, is that happening? Does that happen? I guess that's happening everywhere.
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just, go ahead. You go ahead and talk to me.
Well, it is happening in other areas. I don't know how many articles I've read on women who want to know what's in their products, and especially when it comes down to the whole fragrance issue and perfumes and everything. I bet you there was 2-3 articles alone just on perfume where they weren't able to get the ingredients of what this fragrance even was, and it was because they had the right to keep those ingredients to themselves, the company, so that others could not steal the ingredients.
Right.
As a consumer who is buying the products, you're still not even allowed to know, and they're protected in doing that, and that's crazy to me.
Yeah, I thought that point of development was very interesting that you delved into. I see. We are in our food industry, and just about anything we ingest seems to be, we're just having to be more and more careful because we can't trust the FDA to be accurate and do that for us. So thank you. It's been an outstanding presentation. Thank you.
Maisie, you did an excellent job. I really appreciated your delivery. You seemed naturally relaxed. It just kind of flowed. And so there have been a few that, and I think it's partly practice and partly personality. There have been a few that have been not nearly as good as what you have done. So congratulations, you did a good job.
Thank you.
I also was looking at the points that you made were very effective. I thought the second point, especially the lack of accountability, and I hadn't really thought about how many things the FDA doesn't really care about. They're just looking at 1 or 2 things, and then the rest is just buyer beware, as it were. So let me ask you a question about and maybe you don't know, but does the FDA have certain divisions? And so there's one group that works with food, and then one works with drugs. Do you know anything about it? Because I'm clueless about the FDA.
Honestly, I can't for sure tell you how they actually divide up their departments, but I'm probably on the same page with you that there probably is some sort of division to kind of divvy up the load. I know I watched a documentary because it was talking about cosmetics and the products and how all these products are coming from China and they're going to flea markets, and women's lips are being glued shut with their lipstick that they got on a great deal because there's super glue in the lipstick. But the FDA is supposed to be, regulating all cosmetic products. Well, there was a special team working on that. So my best answer is most likely, but I'm not entirely sure how it is split up.
Well, that's neat. Intriguing topic. Why did you pick this topic?
So I've kind of been raised in a health family, I guess you would say. So been very suspicious about what's actually in our food products and staying away from a lot of the negative ingredients, which are very harmful to health. So most of it was just my upbringing, and I'm very eager to know what I'm actually eating, because I would like to be as healthy as I can be. And that's partly why I'm looking to get some sort of degree in nutrition and wellness.
That was my question. What, you seem so passionate about this that my question was going to be, what are you planning on pursuing? So
Yeah.
Nutrition is excellent. That's great.
Yeah.
Well done, Maisie. I really enjoyed it. You did a good job.
Thank you.
Well, if nobody has any other questions, Maisie, you can go play with the horses now. Great job. Very enjoyable to watch and listen to. Thank